In this video, we are going to look at one more type of display. That display is called grid. We looked at Flexbox, and this is an alternative to that. I'm going to follow along loosely with some of the tutorials in the W3 schools, so I'll post a link to this in the comments. CSS Grid is an alternative to Flexbox. It is a useful way to display content when you want columns and rows, and maybe some way to have content displayed across those rows in a certain style. Now, to introduce it, we won't start initially in our project, but rather the tutorials, so we can play around with it. I'll create a folder. I'm just going to call it grid. I'm going to make a grid.html file. Just going to grab my template. I'm not going to make a CSS file. We're not going to have a ton of CSS, so I'm just going to do style instead. So we can write CSS in here. Now, similar to Flexbox, grid, when we do the display, you're going to have an outside container. In this example here, that's the blue section. And inside that is where you'll have your interior elements. So we'll assign the display to the outside, but it will affect the things inside. Our construction HTML for that is we do an outside div and give it a class of container. And then inside we will have those different boxes. I'm just going to go div.box. I'll create a class of box, just call this 1. And we'll do this a few times and change the numbers. Okay. Let's add a little bit of basic styling. So for the container, let's give it a background color. Aqua's fine. A little bit of padding. How about 10? Let's add some styling to the boxes. Same thing. Background color, aquamarine. Let's give it some padding. 20 pixels. Let's give it a border as well. 2 pixels, just a basic border. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this. Okay, and here we go. Might change this color real quick because they're kind of blending a little bit. Let's just do blue. Okay, hopefully that'll look a little better. Okay, so this dark blue here is where we have our outside container. And inside we have these boxes that are by default just taking up the full width. So we want to change this. We can make some quick steps for that. We're going to change the display, but we're changing the display of the outside element. When we use Flexbox or grid, we will use the outside container as the display change, and that will affect what's inside. Here we're going to add display grid. That by itself won't do anything. When you refresh, nothing happens. There is another property we can use to help. That property is called grid template columns. This basically specifies how many columns you want in your grid. Let's try 2 to start. I'm going to write auto and space auto, and I'll explain what this is in a little bit. But just for now, we'll do 2 autos. You might be able to guess what happens here. It creates 2 columns. Auto is our first one, and the second auto is this one here. If you want 3 columns, just add another one here. Oops. Just like that. And that will create 3 columns. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, you can just get by with just the columns here. You notice if we have 6 items, it will fill up until we run out of space. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, then go to the next row, 1, 2, 3. So basically the amount of rows is determined by the number of objects. If we added another div here, like 7, I save this. Previously when we had 6, we had 2 rows, and now when I refresh, now I'll have 3 rows because we need 1 space here. So each of these divs basically goes into, every div goes into 1 column. The first div goes in the first, then the second, then the third. once we hit the end of our number of columns, we move to the next row. So purpose of me trying to explain this is to say that you can just get by without columns. You don't need to incorporate the rows because the number of rows decide by how many elements you have in your inside the container. Now, what else can we add? You can add spacing in between these different boxes. To do that, we still work on the outside. We can do column gap, specify pixel. There's also a row gap. Okay, and now we got kind of that nice spacing here. Now back to the idea of autos. So the number of basically autos we put here is how many columns we have. Auto means basically just take up an automatic amount of space. So if we have 3 autos, they share the space evenly. This one gets a third, this one gets a third, this one gets a third. But you don't have to use auto. You can specify a pixel amount. So from the first one, I did, let's say, 100 pixels. The second one has 200 pixels. And the third one is auto. Let's see what happens there. Okay. So that means the first column gets 100 pixels, the second column gets 200 pixels, and the third column is just going to take up whatever is left. You notice here as I expand or open this, is the third one that shrinks here because it is being instructed to take what's left over. Whereas the first and second columns, they are static. They're always going to be 100 and 200 pixels. So this can be an easy way for you to kind of get a complex layout to how you want it to be. You have a lot of control over each of the individual box spacings and the spaces in between these boxes. In the next video, we'll look at how you can bleed some of these boxes into other columns and rows.